1778. The previous year was a difficult one for the new United States of America. British forces had captured Philadelphia to gain control of our greatest city, which was then the seat of the Second Continental Congress. British General William Howe, after unsuccessfully attempting to draw General George Washington into a battle in northern New Jersey, embarked his army on transports and advanced them from the Chesapeake Bay north toward Philadelphia. Washington prepared to defend, but was flanked and beaten back in the Battle of Brandywine on September 11th, 1777. Howe had Philadelphia. General Washington failed again at Germantown before retreating to Valley Forge for the winter in December 1777. There we stayed, froze, and drilled, and a quarter of us died from disease and exposure.
The return of warm weather signaled the opening of the campaign season, and the Army, now nearing its 6th month at Valley Forge, was in a fighting mood. The work of Baron von Steuben in putting us through his exercises had made innumerable improvements on our drill and discipline, and that, combined with the happy news of a treaty securing France's support of our cause, had our spirits the highest they'd been in nearly a year. Rumors swirled that the British were about to evacuate Philadelphia, and in case it proved true, General Washington shifted us from our disease-ridden cabins into tents in early June, in case we were needed to make a sudden and rapid movement.
We opened the summer of 1778 by saying farewell to Sir William Howe, who since the first acts of the rebellion had been Commander-in-Chief of His Majesty's armies in America, and Philadelphia, the prize of the last year's campaign, surely will never forget the fate in honor of Lord Howe that was the mischianza. In his place rose the champion of Bunker Hill, Lieutenant General Sir Henry Clinton. News reached us of an alliance between the Americans and France, and with that would come a fleet of French gunships with designs of trapping our army in this city. It fell to Sir Henry to see that the army evacuated Philadelphia for New York, lest the French bottle us in by blockading the Chesapeake. We quitted the city on June 18th, after spending several days sending the baggage, numbering some 1,500 wagons, across the Delaware. The army was divided into 3 columns, under Generals Clinton, Cornwallis, and the Hessian von Knyphausen, which passed from Cooper's Ferry northward through Haddonfield, Mount Holly, and Bordentown. In addition, we had in tow Loyalist evacuees, soldiers' brides, and camp follower of every sort, who encumbered our progress to such an extent that we presented ourselves a fine catch to enemy. Nevertheless, we pushed on east for Sandy Hook on the New Jersey coast, with the intent of embarking upon transports for the safety of New York City.
An express rider brought General Washington the news that the British had vacated Philadelphia, and by afternoon of that day, he had General Sir Charles Lee on the road with Poor's, Varnum's, and Huntington's brigades. The general sounded for the rest of the army on the afternoon of the 19th, and within 2 days we had crossed the Delaware at Coryell's Ferry and enjoyed a day of rest and issued libations. We were still a distance away from the British lines, so His Excellency set the New Jersey militia and Maxwell's brigade of Jersey Continentals on them in order to slow them down for us to make a show upon them.
Every possible exertion was made to prevent us from the same fate as our Northern Army as we crossed the Jerseys, though we were frustrated by innumerable obstacles. The rebels made great efforts to see us burgoyned, as enemy work parties made the roads impassable by felling trees and brushes in our way, and flying parties of their militia kept our light bobs and the Jaegers busy with constant firings and skirmishes along our flank and rear.
On the 25th, our army lay at Kingston, and my regiment was detached to join 1,000 valiant men sent forward to further harass the enemy. General Charles Lee took command of the entire van of our army, numbering nearly 5,000 men, and under him we arrived in the village of Englishtown the next day. General Washington ordered that the parole was to be lookout and sharp and keen. These were our countersigns for the day. We had been wishing for a fight, and we knew before long that we would have fighting enough.
On the morning of Sunday the 28th, we rejoined our march on the road to Middletown. Small bodies of their horse and foot soon appeared, and fell in with Colonel Simcoe and his Rangers, and soon a larger rebel corps appeared and began to make a show of force on our rear guard, comprised of the 16th Light Dragoons, Ovenden's troop of the Queen's Rangers, and the 1st Battalion of Light Infantry, which until that point had yet to move forward.
We advanced with the aim of pinning the enemy in place and then to fall in on his flanks. Our efforts were hampered, as all of our movements were continually exposed to well-aimed artillery fire. Among the earliest of our losses was Colonel Wesson, who was struck as we were coming into the Great Plain north of the village of Freehold.
Sir Henry, I have a message from Sir William Erskine.
Very good. What is it?
The enemy is forcing our rear with more men than before. He has observed Major General Lee, Lafayette, and possibly General Wayne.
Where is Sir William?
Sir William is just withdrawn from the courthouse and is forming his men up in the rear.
Excellent. Tell Sir William to take up a defensive posture. I'll bring back the 1st Division. He is to be prepared as we march up with the Rangers and Light Infantry to move back the Amboy Road.
Very good,
He
sir.
is to try to cut off the rebel retreat. By God, we may bag a fox today yet.
Very good, sir.
General Clinton calculated a shock for Mr. Washington, and recalled Lord Cornwallis's 1st Division, which had already advanced but only 4 miles on the road to Middletown.
An increasingly larger force of the enemy began to appear in front of us, which caused alarm in the ranks. The spirit proved contagious, and soon the entire corps had turned and made tracks quick-step towards Englishtown. The plowed fields we marched over seemed hotter than ovens, and we quickly emptied our canteens to relieve our parching thirst. Some, who had nothing to drink, popped musket balls into their mouths and gently chewed upon them, and while not as refreshing as a draught of water, it was enough to keep their throats somewhat wet.
It was not yet noon, but the heat was already intolerable. The sun beat down on our heads with a force beyond anything conceivable in Europe, as our men, still in heavy marching order, pursued the retreating rebels. Many fell by the side of the road, and still others died on the spot, unable to support the fatigue of a march in excess of 5 miles, part of which was on a scorching road composed of nothing but sand.
The main corps was now passing through Englishtown, and General Washington pressed on to the field to apprise himself of the unfolding action. As he arrived, he was at a loss to see men of General Lee's command streaming rearwards and not attacking, as he was ordered to.
Piper, you a soldier? Why are you returning this way?
Men are in general retreat, sir.
Out of my way!
General Washington rode ahead to meet General Lee as our men continued to stream back, confused but orderly, from the direction of Monmouth Courthouse. The guns of the pursuing British could be heard in the distance as the general prodded Lee to answer for his actions. Those nearby said His Excellency was warm in his treatment of Lee, but I'd wager that if he was half as hot as at Kips Bay, he would have sworn enough to make the trees shake and the angels cry.
What is all this? This confusion and retreat.
Sir, there's no confusion. The men are not following my orders. They are not.
Why are you retreating? They have only a strong covering party?
Sir, this is incorrect. They seem to have more men than we have. But you told us we not advance in the next 3 days. We are not supposed to get in this state. Look how many there are.
Will you take command? Or I take command? If I take command, I'll return to the main army and arrange it.
Sir, you've already given me the command here. I will stay here. I will not be the last man off this field.
Take proper measures for checking the enemy here.
Very good, sir.
Take aim! Fire! I'm load!
He relieved Lee to the rear and immediately set to securing our position by first throwing forward my regiment, along with a body of men under Colonels Stewart and Ramsey, forward into a point of woods to check the enemy's advance. He then set up a supporting line of Colonel Livingston's New Yorkers and Colonel Olney's Rhode Islanders at a hedge fence before seeing to the main body coming up from Englishtown.
Our race brought us back through the village of Freehold and out onto a great plain. The Guards and the 1st and 2nd Battalion of Grenadiers pushed up from a steep gully and bore down upon a detachment of the enemy, which had posted in ambush in a wood, where a smart action ensued.
We opened on them with a brisk fire of small arms, and the men each discharged their pieces 3 or 4 times until the enemy was nearly upon us, when we turned and took flight. One of my men, a soldier by the name of Solomon Parsons, stepped up to fire before joining us on the run, and had gone several rods before he was struck in the thigh by a ball. He fell to the ground and was quickly overrun, as the enemy was fast on our heels.
At one battery of Pennsylvania artillery on that scorching hot Sunday, a legendarily heroic event played out. Mary Ludwig Hayes, along with other camp followers, normally served as water girls during training, carrying water to drilling infantry troops on hot days. The cannon themselves always demanded a constant supply of fresh water to cool the blazing hot barrel and to soak the rag-tipped rammer to clear sparks and gunpowder after each shot. Some have said that Mary Hayes earned her famous nickname, Molly Pitcher, during this time. Soldiers would shout, "Molly! Pitcher!" whenever they needed Mary to bring water. Mary marched along with her husband William's artillery battery into this battle. At some time, during an intense crossfire, William Hayes collapsed next to his cannon, either wounded or collapsed from heat exhaustion. As her husband was carried off, Mary took his place at the cannon, and for the rest of the day, and in the heat of battle, continued to work the booming guns alongside her husband's comrades. After the battle, General Washington asked about the woman whom he had seen loading a cannon on the battlefield. For her courage, it is believed that he issued Mary Hayes a warrant as a non-commissioned officer. Sergeant Molly was a nickname that she used for the rest of her life. If Molly Pitcher be folklore or history, a legend from the Battle of Monmouth, she remains.
We pushed on with true British spirit and sent the rebels flying from the wood to the safety of a second line which had drawn up in waiting behind a rail fence a few hundred yards to our front. Any attempts to regain order were futile, as our men drove after the fleeing rebels and killed many with their bayonets.
Our men, put to flight from the point of woods, streamed back through the hedge fence, where Colonel Livingston's men awaited their turn at the game. They held their fire until the enemy came within 40 yards, and then unleashed a violent fire. Lieutenants Cook and Oswald brought their guns up on the line and had time enough to let loose several rounds through the gaps of the hedgerow fence before they were obliged to pull the guns back across a bridge which spanned a morass in front of our final defensive line, which General Washington had been busy forming.
They laid into us with grape from short range, but we pressed forward. Spurred along by General Clinton, who rode down the line like a Newmarket jockey, shouting, "Charge, Grenadiers! Never heed for me."
Fire! You! Oh!
We advanced at a rush in the face of heavy musketry and gained the fence, but with a heavy cost. Our commander of the 2nd Battalion, Colonel Henry Monckton of the 42nd, was killed in the action, struck through the breast by grape shot, a loss which was regretted by the entire army.
Sir. Sir. You're injured, sir. Sergeant!
If he can dismount some of those rebel guns, the grenadiers may be able to cross the bridge.
Sir.
While the delaying actions were underway, General Washington supervised the placement of Lord Stirling's division, which then was passing a meeting house and arriving on the field. As they came into place, the general rode along the line, sometimes at full speed, looking nobly and excited, calling us his brave boys and asking if we would fight, to which we answered him with 3 cheers.
Brigade! For His Excellency, George Washington! Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip!
He brought up the Knox's artillery and arrayed them along the ridge we now occupied. They immediately opened on the advancing enemy, which had carried the hedge and halted them there.
Guns. Have all of the battalion guns brought to this hill. Tell Major Williams to bring up the 12-pounders and the howitzers. If he can dismount some of those rebel guns, the grenadiers may be able to cross the bridge.
In response to our cannon halting their advance, the British batteries now opened on our line of artillery.
Load.
Our guns replied in kind, playing the second part of the same tune. It was some of the finest music I ever heard, though some of the boys would have differing opinions as to the agreeableness of the music, as the balls came a little too near to their tastes. The enemy's howitzers were well aimed, but they cut their fuses too long, and many of their rounds burst in the ground around us. I saw several men wounded by shards of wood when the rail fence they were laying behind was splintered from such a shot.
Our 6-pounders, long 9s, 12s, and howitzers played briskly on the American cannon for nearly 2 hours, while the remnants of our shattered battalion took cover behind the brow of the hill. Some of our men were unwilling to bear the heat in the open, and gambled their safety by seeking the shade of trees directly in the range of the enemy's shot. The unfortunate Captain Powell of the 52nd Grenadiers was among these, and he had his arm rent by a rebel ricochet. As our Grand Battery was in action, Major General Sir Charles Grey took his 3rd Brigade, reinforced by Sir William Erskine's Rangers and light infantry, and attempted to move against the left of the American lines.
His Excellency was conspicuous in all parts of the field, and he was followed not a pace behind by his servant, Will Lee. At one point, as he was observing the action developing to our left, an enemy shot struck quite near to the general, spattering him with mud. Some officers nearby urged that he move to safety, and he coolly replied that it was a fine spot where he could admire how well Proctor's guns were handling the enemy's right.
As the 3rd Brigade retired, the 2nd Battalion of the 42nd Royal Highlanders remained in an orchard near a farmhouse directly in front of the enemy's line. There they sought cover from both the excessive heat and a barrage of enemy canister and small arms.
A body of Scotch troops found themselves in a tight spot in an orchard about 200 yards in front of our position. General Washington ordered Colonel Joseph Seeley forward with his detachment of picked light infantry to see what he could do about driving off the rascals. Bringing along with him a 6-pounder and Colonel Parker's Virginians in support, they advanced rapidly under a cover of a skirt of wood and sprang onto the enemy's flank, which put poor Sawney on the run.
Finding their position untenable, the Royal Highlanders immediately formed and made a precipitated withdrawal. As General Grey had already removed the 3rd Brigade from this portion of the field, the 42nd found themselves the sole recipients of the enemy's grape, which was fired into their exposed flank, killing and wounding several.
Not wanting to let his prize slip away, Colonel Seeley threw several platoons ahead as skirmishers to slow them down. His line was momentarily slowed down by a rail fence, which the men laid flat in an instant. It would not have surprised me if the dear colonel, an excitable fellow, had leapt over the fence, much like he leapt atop a field piece his New Hampshire boys captured at Saratoga.
A party of their skirmishers kept up a desultory sort of fire until their line proceeded to deliver several volleys which were answered by ours with ardor. a 3-pounder situated on the height we commanded, supported them.
Cover it.
Keeping the fugitives in check as our Highland troops fell back and crossed a morass before reaching the safety of our lines.
One of their light grasshoppers opened on us, and that first shot took off the thigh bone of a captain and continued on to leave a private behind him without his heel. As they had nearly joined their main body, Colonel Seeley had us reload our pieces to give them a set-off, and with a final parting salute, we ended our chase. We then set to the nearby fences and bushes where we laid down, the air so hot we were scarcely able to breathe.
Upon regaining the Highlanders, General Clinton thought it prudent to order a general withdrawal. He began by first drawing off the artillery, which had done exceedingly admirable work.
Thank you. That was worth it.
The inexhaustible General Wayne was again called upon to lead his men, true sons of liberty they are, to feel the enemy's presence as His Excellency perceived that they were beginning to retire from the field. They advanced and fell into the 2nd Battalion of Grenadiers.
Again, the rebels pushed forward and designed to make a havoc on our lines. But the 2nd Battalion, supported by the 33rd Foot, thrust them back, and we followed suit to take a turn on them. Coming upon them, again posted behind the fences occupying the grounds of a house and barn, I urged on their route and shouted to my men, "Come on, my brave boys, for the honor of Great Britain." Their men leveled their pieces and gave us a murderous fire, whereupon I was thrown from my horse, which was killed by their volley.
Their fire matched ours in severity, which struck down Lieutenant Colonel Buhner of the 3rd Pennsylvania. It continued for some time until General Greene, by way of a back lane, maneuvered his brigade of Woodford's Virginians onto the property of a Mr. Combe, where there was a prominent hill which gave a splendid view of the left of the British line bearing down on Wayne. He had with him a battery under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Duplessis, and immediately went to work, delivering a sustained fire of solid shot against their flank.
Sir, those guns are about out of range, and I've only got 20 rounds for each gun.
Damn! Draw your guns across the morass. Leave one 12-pounder here to support the Grenadiers.
Aye, sir!
A battery, posted on an elevation far to our left, kept up a lively fire of enfilading shot upon our exposed flank, which forced us to yield our post.
Ready? Fire!
Our battalion fell back beyond the wood fence until we finally drew off the field after nearly 6 hours of sustained action.
With our men consumed by the fatigues of one of the hottest days I ever knew, our scrimmage at Monmouth drew to a close. The men were completely played out. Poor's brigade was advanced near the enemy's pickets, but only to observe their movements through the night. Come morning, we found that Sir Harry had given us the slip. Surely, he'll get no laurels for his costly sheep-stealing expedition, and neither he nor His Britannic Majesty can say that we skulked in the bushes and fought like Indians, for we met the proud guards and grenadiers in the open field, and we sent them scurrying. Soon after, word reached the army that a promised French fleet had arrived off the Jersey coast, though too late for us. Rather than toast the capture of General Clinton and his army, we moved by easy marches to King's Ferry and White Plains, where we found ourselves near the same ground we had set out from nearly 2 years ago.
The war dragged on for another almost 4 years, but the major fighting in the north was all but over. In 1780, the British began a southern strategy to bully control of our rebel colonies with the capture of Charleston, South Carolina. This effort would ultimately fail at Yorktown in October 1781, when final victory was ours.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.